There have been rumors of a Beckham family feud, stemming from Brooklyn's wedding to actress Nicola Peltz to Nicola clashed with mother-in-law Victoria recently. Brooklyn and Nicola have been no-shows at family events like David Beckham's 50th birthday. What's your take on all of this?
He grew up as Britain's golden boy, so why does the family's firstborn feel missing from the moments that matter now? We'll decode the signals everyone argues about. The dress that read like a message, the contract that felt like a power test, and the birthday absence that said more than any caption. Stick around as we trace how two dynasties and two definitions of love and brand quietly pulled one couple into the center, and what happens next when silence gets louder than statements. He grew up inside highlight reels, football glory on one side, fashion runways on the other, the kind of childhood where your last name arrives before you do. So why now does it feel like the family's firstborn is drifting just beyond the frame? It isn't one blow-up or one headline. It's the quiet stuff that speaks the loudest. The event you skip, the message you don't post, the dinner you let happen without you. People point at a dress, a product launch, a tattoo cover, like those explain everything. They don't. Those are surface ripples on a deeper current. Legacy versus autonomy, the pull of two powerful households and a young couple trying to build their own rhythm while the world keeps the beat for them.
We all love Victoria Beckham, we love the Beckhams. There were some moments that I think would bother me if I were Nicola. So allegedly at the wedding, important dance, it was just her and her husband. Victoria came running in and jumped in and took over the dance. If my mother-in-law did that.
Here's the part most timelines miss. In families this visible, every tiny choice gets inflated until it looks like a manifesto. Change your city, it's a statement. Sign a paper, or don't, it's a declaration. Wear one label instead of another. Suddenly, it's diplomacy. From the outside, it's tempting to call winners and losers. Inside, it's messier and more human. Love wants space. Brand wants order. And when those two collide, the fallout doesn't come as fireworks. It arrives as silence. That's the story we're telling, not the tabloid version, the human version. We're going to follow the breadcrumbs from fairy tale optics to fault lines you only notice on the 100th day, not the first. Because this was never just about a gown or a business deal. It's about who gets to steer the narrative of a life when your name is already a headline. And if you think you know the moment everything cracked, hold that thought. The first real fracture showed up long before anyone saw it. From the balcony shots to the ring reveal, their story read like a magazine spread. The whirlwind trips, the sunlit proposals, the guest list that looks like a front row. It all said perfect. But perfection is a filter, not a foundation. Two households came to the table with very different engines under the hood. One is built on athletic discipline and pop culture precision, a machine that runs on timing, training, and immaculate optics. The other speaks the language of boardrooms and billion-dollar moves, calmer on the surface, but used to calling shots that echo for years. Both are powerful, both protect their own, and both are used to being the center of gravity in any room. At first, that difference feels like variety. New stylists, new schedules, new friends who speak a slightly different dialect of success. Then the calendar starts to tell a story. Whose premieres matter more? Which family holidays get circled in pen, not pencil? Which invitations are "we'll try" and which are "we're there"? None of this is war. It's logistics. But logistics turn into loyalties when you live under a spotlight. The public only sees the cropped result. Who stood next to whom, which caption went up, who missed a dinner. The context, travel, work, weird timing, genuine effort, never makes the frame. And there's the quiet emotional math that every couple does, but famous couples can't hide. How much of us is us, and how much is legacy? How do you stay grateful for the family brand that raised you without feeling drafted by it forever? How do you show love to in-laws who are also institutions? Those questions don't explode, they accumulate. If the wedding felt like the final chapter of a fairy tale, real life started at the fittings. Because in families like these, even fabric has a subtext, and one creative choice can sound like a manifesto. Which brings us to the dress, and why a gown became a Rorschach test for two dynasties.
A wedding dress shouldn't carry this much weight. And yet, in families where image is currency, fabric turns into subtext. To most brides, the gown is a feeling. To the outside world watching this union, it became a signal. Choose one atelier and it reads as a love letter to legacy. Choose another and it reads as independence, a creative spine, a line in the sand that says, I know my own taste. That's the trap of living in public. Personal choices get translated into press releases you never wrote. Was it logistics? A timing crunch? Pure aesthetics? Maybe all three. But the interpretation machine doesn't pause to ask. It spins. If the dress isn't from the family label, whispers start. Are they misaligned? If it is, new whispers. Is she being absorbed? Either way, the narrative finds a way to turn silk into strategy. People forget that designers aren't just brands. They're relationships, with fit, with comfort, with how a woman wants to feel when every camera in the world is aimed at her. That inner calculus is intimate. The outer reading is anything but. And then there's the spotlight moment that every reception creates. The speeches, the songs, the one impromptu dance that looks sweet to some and pointed to others. In normal lives, it's a sentimental blur. In this life, it's freeze-framed and argued over like evidence. Compliments become conjecture, a lyric choice becomes a thesis, a smile becomes a storyline. None of this requires malice to matter. It only requires meaning-hungry eyes staring at a stage where two dynasties are learning the choreography in real time. Here's the bigger truth hiding inside the tool. Creative choices are how couples claim their voice, not to reject a family, but to define a marriage. Sometimes that looks like wearing the house label with pride. Sometimes it looks like choosing a different seam and saying, this is me. Either path can be loving. Either path can be read as defiance by people who prefer their stories tidy. So yes, the dress became a Rorschach test. Not because fabric is fate, but because symbols are easy and people are complicated. And once the audience starts reading symbolism into outfits, they'll read it into everything. Signatures, surnames, projects, posts, which is exactly where the next fault line surfaced. Not on a runway, but on paper. Paper sounds harmless until it decides who gets to steer the story. In families where a last name is an asset, contracts are sold as seatbelts. This protects everyone. Sometimes they do. Other times, they feel like a leash, with nice stationery. A clause that looks routine to one camp can read like control to the other. Add new advisors with fresh instincts, and a simple signature turns into a philosophy question. Are we safeguarding a person or safeguarding a brand? Here's the uncomfortable truth most headlines skip. Names aren't just names here. They're engines. Hyphenate it, drop it, emphasize it, park it on a product. Every choice becomes a market signal and a family signal at the same time. When you're young and married, that's a lot of weight to place on a line in an email. Delay a signature, and you're difficult. Sign too fast, and you're managed. Ask for changes, and you're starting trouble. No answer you give is neutral, because neutrality doesn't trend. This is where love and legal cross wires. One side says, we're protecting you from chaos. The other hears, we're protecting our equity from you. Same sentence, two translations. And because both households are used to setting the rhythm, compromise can feel like surrender. You can see how quickly it becomes personal. A piece of paper isn't just a contract. It's a mirror. It reflects what each side fears. Losing autonomy, losing access, losing the right to choose what the name means next.
So, the calculus shifts. You pick your projects with more intention. You rename things. You put some decisions on pause, not to start a war, but to draw a map. That's what outsiders miss when they reduce it to, he signed or she refused. The real plot lives in the boundary lines couples redraw when legacy and independence tug in opposite directions. And once those lines are sketched, identities start showing up in quieter places. In the art you add to your skin, the city you choose, the circles you orbit. That's where the next chapter lives. The signals that don't need a contract to be binding. Most reinventions don't arrive with a press release. They show up in small edits, a different cut of jacket, a cleaner feed, new work that feels less like a side quest and more like the main plot. Tattoos get layered, not deleted. A new piece grows over the old like ivy over brick. That isn't betrayal,
It's a diary written on skin. Outsiders squint at a photo and decide it's a manifesto. Usually, it's simpler. People evolve, and the art they carry evolves with them. Cities do the same thing to a person. You move, and your rhythm changes. Who you bump into, what time you eat, which ideas seem possible at 10 p.m. Distance becomes an easy villain online. If you loved them, you'd be here. Real life is messier. Love rarely fits a postcode, but algorithms moralize geography. Miles turn into motives. A quiet project in Los Angeles looks like a statement in London. A week of family dinners without a selfie looks like silence. When every moment is sortable and searchable, absence isn't allowed to be ordinary anymore. Identity also hides in the boring details that never make headlines. Who you text first with good news, whose advice you take without defensiveness, which holidays feel like home. Those choices don't trend, but they add up. Over time, you can feel a center of gravity shifting, not away from one family, but toward the life you're actively building. It's less goodbye and more, this is where my day starts now. To fans, that nuance is invisible. To the people living it, it's everything. And that's how we get to the moments that read louder than they're meant to. The milestone gatherings where seating charts become storylines, and an empty chair says more than any caption. Because if identity is a slow edit, milestones are the freeze frame. Which brings us to the birthday that told a bigger story than anyone planned. Milestone birthdays in famous families are never just cake. They're choreography. Guest lists become tea leaves. Seating becomes subtext. A single empty chair can drown out 100 kind messages because the photo is what survives. Maybe the calendar clash was real. Maybe travel got messy. Maybe the lowest drama choice was to sit this one out. None of that fits in a caption, so the internet writes its own. Distance, snub, statement. That's the hard math of public life. 10 quiet visits don't trend. One missed moment does. And once the picture lands without you in it, the commentary machine starts assigning motives. The timeline gets weaponized. If they cared, they'd be here. As if affection is measured by air miles and not the kind of check-ins that never see daylight. In regular families, this would be an argument that blows over by dessert. Here, it becomes a storyline with a chorus. Birthdays also surface old dynamics no one planned to revisit. Siblings with residual static, friends with overlapping histories, plus the unglamorous logistics of fitting multiple empires into one evening. You can love everyone in the room and still not belong to the moment. And when you're already renegotiating identity, name, work, geography, a crowded table can feel like a test you didn't agree to take.
So the absence speaks louder than intended, not because it's a declaration, but because silence echoes in big rooms. And that echo pushes the story into its next phase, out of kitchens and group chats, and into headlines, lawyers' letters, and carefully worded statements, which is where family narrative turns into public narrative, and the volume gets turned up whether anyone wants it or not. When attorneys enter the chat, the story stops being a family conversation and starts speaking in footnotes. Letters fly, not to start a courtroom battle, but to draw lines in sand. This is fair, that is not, and here's where we won't be misquoted again. It's boundary setting with a barcode, but the internet doesn't care about nuance. It hears legal and translates it to war, because we'd like some accuracy please doesn't trend. Then come the insiders, always unnamed, always certain. One quote says support, another says spin, and suddenly fans are jurors for a case no one actually filed. Algorithms reward the loudest version of events, not the truest. Every calm statement gets framed as damage control. Every no comment becomes proof. Post a smiling photo and it's strategy. Don't post and it's shade. It's a rigged game. The more you defend, the guiltier you look. PR playbooks offer two choices: feed the fire or starve it. Feeding it gives you a day's worth of applause and a month of fallout.
Starving it buys you peace in private and chaos in the comments. Families built on brand discipline often pick silence, not as surrender, but as self-respect. Still, silence is the one thing a rumor can't fight, so the echo chamber keeps echoing, bouncing half-facts off headlines until the original story is unrecognizable. Meanwhile, real life keeps happening off-camera. Parents text, siblings vent, partners negotiate boundaries that no press release could ever explain. That's the maddening split screen of public families. On one side, narratives sharpen into caricature. On the other, people try to stay soft enough to forgive each other. If there's a villain here, it's the pace. The way a 24-hour cycle forces a decade-old relationship into a daily referendum. And that brings us to the only part worth betting on. The next chapter won't look dramatic. It'll look ordinary. A call that lasts longer than expected. A visit with no caption. A decision to stop fighting over who wins the narrative and start protecting what outlives it. Which is where we're headed next. The bigger picture and what healing actually looks like when both sides are also brands. Step back from the headlines and the hashtags, and you see something universal. A young couple trying to write their own story, while two proud families try to keep theirs intact. That tension isn't scandal, it's physics. Legacy has momentum. Love wants a lane. Put them together and you get friction that feels personal even when it's structural. The internet begs for a villain because villains are easy to follow. Real life is gentler and harder. A series of imperfect choices made by people who care about each other and don't always agree on what care should look like. So, what does next look like when both sides are also brands? Probably smaller than you'd expect. Not a press conference, a phone call that lasts longer than planned. Not a grand reunion, a quiet dinner where everyone agrees to keep the cameras in their pockets. Boundaries get drawn in sentences like, "We love you, and here's how to love us back." Names stay, shift, or share space without turning into weapons. Projects get chosen because they feel right, not because they prove a point. None of that trends. All of it heals. If you're watching for signals, look for the unglamorous ones. A low-key visit, a soft liking spree, a holiday photo where placement looks natural instead of negotiated. Look for effort that isn't optimized for applause. Reconciliation in public life doesn't arrive as fireworks. It appears as routine, consistent, slightly boring, quietly brave. And that's the takeaway worth keeping. This was never just a dress, a contract, or a caption. It's a lesson in identity under pressure, how to stay yourself without making your family the enemy. So here's the question I'll leave you with. When brand and love pull in different directions, which one should give first? And how do you know you chose right?